College, and that's Stephen Graham, and his topic is It's Tough Being a Teenager.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And like thousands of other people in Ireland, I am a teenager. Now, this may be an unpleasant thing to hear. However, it's the truth. Teenagers like myself are not knackers, hoodlums or thugs who go about beating up old ladies, smashing cars, or defacing public property, as we can often be portrayed. These images are just unfair stereotypes given to us by the media. Have you ever met someone who acted just as teens are stereotyped? Not many people have, because they don't exist. Real teens are portrayed poorly in the media and are the complete opposite of their stereotypes. Books and TV shows make teens out to be wild, crazy, and out of control. It is for this reason that we get a very hard time. Lots of people have preconceived ideas, and before anybody even knows us, we're bad news, not to be associated with. This, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, can be very hard for any teenage person to deal with, and can really affect your mental health, especially, for example, if you're standing outside a shop and a shopkeeper comes out and tells you to get lost, even though you're doing nothing wrong. It's a horrible feeling, like you're different from everybody else just because of your age. It's a form of discrimination, and it's ageism, and it's one of the things that our society has not properly dealt with yet. Sure, it's dealt with problems like racism or discrimination over your nationality, religion or sex, but there's a huge difference between the two. The difference being that you're young once and only once. Then it's forgotten about, to be recalled later perhaps while watching your own children on Christmas morning. While something like discrimination over your race meant you were like that your whole life, and if you wanted something done about it, and that meant something had to be done if you didn't want to be dealing with the same problems forever. Adults don't remember how hard and tough it was to be a teenager. But even if they did, it's no longer their problem. Is it? Of course it is. If something is wrong, and you know it is, you try and make that something right, even if it doesn't directly concern you. America stood up to Senator Joe McCarthy a few years ago, in the 1970s, when he unjustly discriminated against people he didn't like, calling them communists without any proof or reason in order to gain popularity. Much in the same way, the media has branded the average teenagers knackers and hoodlums, and given them a society a false image of them. And now, just as America stood up for the average teenager then, it is our duty as a people to stand up for teenagers now. And yes, you might say that we've nothing to complain about, that the way teens are portrayed isn't that bad, surely. What does it matter when most of us have loving parents look after us, provide for us, and all we have to do is a few simple chores? Well, that's exactly what men used to say to women before equal rights were brought in for men and women in the 1960s. Women had a different image then, and the changing of that image opened up a whole new era for them. We are not satisfied with our current treatment. People are not satisfied with us being teenagers, living like teenagers, and discovering what it means to be teenagers. Almost all of us are causing no harm with the exception of a few. I plead with you, don't condemn us because of the exception. After all, in reality, the average teenager has enough to be worrying about, least of all how society sees them. It should be a given that we are accepted so we can finish our maturing in a safe, secure and fair world. As with teenage acceptance the way it is, practically non-existent, who knows what damage is being done to us psychologically? It is well known that a number of teenagers find it hard to connect and be a part of the world. Maybe their treatment, because of this false image, is the reason as to why this is the case. Whether this is the sole reason or not, the current teenager's image isn't the only reason why it's tough being a teenager. The average teenager is under huge pressure in both their studies and the extracurricular activities they take part in. It is an accepted idea that all teens should go to college, of course after getting 600 points in the Leaving Cert. However, this stereotype is unreasonable. Not everybody is suited for college or able to get top points in the Leaving Cert. And while lots of teenagers might be poor in school, they could be fantastic at other things, but feel they must conform just to fit in. This can not only damage their mental health, but also their personality and confidence with it. The average teenager also has to deal with trying to find jobs during a recession and consider emigration when they quickly realise there is no work to be found. All of this, combined with the fact that there are very few outlets to deal with the problems and mental stresses that teenagers go through. The recession came, and now the few youth centres and sports clubs that are there are being shut down. People can no longer afford to send their teens to much-needed therapy and left everybody so caught up in their own lives that they have no time to listen and help share the teenager's burden. Tough just became near impossible. It seems to me that the few things that teenagers do that adults constantly give out about are the simple things that help teens get by. Like constantly listening to music, for instance. Music has been proven to have therapeutic and soothing properties, which can greatly relieve a teenager's tough life. With issues and problems like these, I think it is fair to say that it's tough being a teenager, not to mention other things like physical and changes in personality development. So to conclude, in the words of Richard Hooker, change is not made without inconvenience from worse to better, suggesting that in this case it may take some time before the toughness of a teenager's life gets any easier. It is important to remember, though, that as teenagers, we must help this change come about. The old joke that a teenager who changes the course of history is probably doing an exam at school is not necessarily true. So until that time, why not make life a little bit less tough and try and understand what we're going through? After all, you've all had to deal with some of these problems yourself at some point. And perhaps if this is done now, it may lead to fewer problems in adults in later years, all because our lives were made a little bit less tough when we were teenagers.